Good morning, everyone. I'm Pastor John, and it's good to have you here this morning. It's my honor to bring you the message for today. She had every reason to be bitter. This woman had every reason to be bitter. Though talented, she went unrecognized for years. Prestigious opera circles closed their rank when she tried to enter. American critics ignored her compelling voice. She was repeatedly rejected for parts that she would have easily qualified for. It was only after she went to Europe and she won the hearts of tough-to-please European audiences that stateside opinion leaders acknowledged her talent. Now, not only was her professional life a battle, but her personal life was marked by challenge as well. She was the mother of 2 disabled children, one of whom was severely challenged. And in order to escape the pace of New York City, she bought a home in Martha's Vineyard. It burned to the ground 2 days before she was to move in. Professional rejection, personal setbacks, perfect soil for the seeds of bitterness. Wouldn't you agree? A receptive field for the roots of resentment. But in this case, anger found no home. Her friends didn't call her bitter. They called her Bubbles. Who was she? Beverly Sills, international acclaimed opera singer, former director of the New York Opera. Her phrases were sugared with laughter. Her face was softened with serenity. Upon interviewing her, Mike Wallace of 60 Minutes stated that she was one of the most impressive, if not the most impressive women he had ever interviewed. Beverly Sills. How can a person handle such professional rejection, personal trauma, and still be known as Bubbles? I chose to be cheerful, she said. I know I had little or no choice about success, circumstances, or even happiness, but I could choose to be cheerful. A retired United Methodist bishop once said, "If you are at the stage of life or age of life where your back goes out more than you do, don't let your aches get in the way of your Halleluiahs." I kind of like that, but I changed it a little bit. I changed it a little bit to say, don't let your heartaches get in the way of your hallelujahs. Dr. M. Scott Peck, in his best-selling book, The Road Less Traveled, begins with the statement, life is difficult. In a sequel to that book, he begins by saying, life is complex. Both statements are, of course, true. Life is both difficult and complex. But Advent is the season of hope. The prophet Isaiah said, "Oh God, that you would tear open the heavens and come down." We affirm during this season, the most basic teaching of our Christian faith, and that is that God has come into our world through the person of Jesus Christ. The Word has become flesh, and now life does not seem near as daunting, as frightening, as dreary, or as gray. Today we open the Advent season that leads to the celebration of the birth of Christ on Christmas Day. We prepare the way of the Lord to enter our hearts more deeply. This is why we do not lose heart or hope. This is why our heartaches do not drown out our hallelujahs. Because our God comes to us. Our God comes to us to change our lives from fear into hope. Our lesson from Mark's Gospel today deals with that event that shall herald the end of history. We call it the second coming of Christ. The biblical description of that final victory of good over evil, or light over darkness, love over hatred, is both vivid and disturbing. And yet, the second coming of Christ, I don't believe, will be any more dramatic in its consequences for humankind than his first coming some 2,000 years ago. The power of his first coming is still resonating in the world today. Jesus has already taught us not to speculate as to when that day will be, right? That's very clear. There are more important issues at hand, and so that's what we want to talk about this morning, those more important issues at hand. So first of all, Jesus tells us to get on with living our lives for God in the present moment, in this time. Let's get on with living our lives for God. The gospel lesson assures us today that history will find its completion in Christ. We are invited to watch and participate while history works its relentless way towards God's intention. Now, history is not some blind force or an act of sheer power. There is power and purpose at work. I mean, we saw this in the dismantling of the Berlin Wall and the end of apartheid in South Africa and the collapse of communism in the former Soviet Union. The power behind this universe is a power that disrupts and a power that heals. God is at work now. The second coming will only bring it to completion. In the meantime, we do not live a paralyzed state wondering, well, when will it be? And concentrate all our energy on when will the second coming be, like some do. We are to go out now. We're going on with our lives and live our lives to its fullest. Some of you may remember the Pepsi commercial featuring that outstanding musician Ray Charles as he sings the song, "You Got the Right One, Baby." Well, I want to tell you that as far as mothers go, Ray Charles certainly had the right one. Some of you may know that Ray Charles went blind during his childhood. Now, his blindness could have caused him to endure a life of defeat and self-pity very easily. It was his mother who said to him, "You may have lost your eyes, but you have not lost your mind." She encouraged him and at times forced him to be all he could be. He was to focus not on being a victim of life's harshness and unfairness, but to rise above it all and become a star. This is exactly what the power of God can do in the life of one committed to Jesus Christ. Our faith enables us to walk through the valley of dark experiences, not to camp out there the rest of our life in a place of despair and fear. One woman put it this way: "Many Christians count their blessings on their fingertips," she says, "but count their burdens on their calculators." Focus on living now. Christ is alive and well on planet Earth, in and through the power of the Holy Spirit. Now, many Christians fail to remember that the power of evil has already been judged and defeated. When Jesus Christ died on the cross, our sin debt was paid in full and Satan was defeated. We don't fight the good fight to achieve the victory. We fight from the victory that Jesus Christ has already won for us. If God at times confronts and challenges us, let us never forget that God also comforts us as a mother comforts her child. Don't lose heart. Don't let your heartaches get in the way of your hallelujahs. Live now, today. Pour your energy into great work and cause today. But there's a second thing we need to see. As we live between Christ's first coming and his final coming, he has not given us a spirit of fear, but a spirit of love and freedom to serve him faithfully. Christ's words about the climactic end of history were not intended to frighten his disciples, but to reassure them and to encourage them. Regardless of how difficult things would be for them, Christ wanted them to know that they were in the hands of God. They did not need to be afraid. I read a wonderfully delightful story about Dr. Norman Vincent Peale. He was one of the most sought-after speakers of the 20th century. Well, shortly before his death, he spoke for his good friend Robert Schuller at the Crystal Cathedral. Dr. Schuller began his introduction by saying, "I want to introduce you to the most dynamic person you will ever meet in your life. He is exciting, positive, and winsome. He can reach down inside of you more deeply than anyone else you have ever known before. He will give you self-confidence and courage and a whole lot of other things you've always wanted in your life but have not had." Well, Dr. Peale was astounded. He had never been introduced like this before. How could he possibly respond to this introduction? And as he was trying to think of some response, he heard Dr. Schuler continue. The person of whom I am speaking is, of course, Jesus Christ. And here to tell you about him is my friend, Dr. Norman Vincent Peale. Yes, Jesus Christ came. He came to free us to be all that God intends for us to be. From that moment, when Jesus Christ entered the human race at Bethlehem, there came a tremendous power. There came light into our world. There came life, and there came a future. No matter how hard circumstances seem to be, there's never a time in the life of a child of God when he or she ought to conclude, well, that's it, I quit, I throw in the towel, I give up. If God can reach down and touch the earth and all of its darkness and sin and win the victory, then God can certainly bring victory into our situation, whatever that situation may be, no matter how desperate. If freedom is the ability to fulfill the purpose for which we were created, then fear is that power which attempts to destroy that purpose and goal. Christ knew the awesome power that fear could unleash into the life of a believer. He knew that. He saw it in his own disciples when paralyzed by fear. He also saw how liberating that love and freedom were. Now, did Jesus say in John 10:10, I came that they may have fear, or I came that they may have life and have it abundantly? Does Jesus Christ come to cause us pain and suffering, the heartaches, or does he come to give us strength to sing our hallelujahs over the heartaches of life? Advent assures us, the believer, that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but a spirit of love and freedom to serve God faithfully. And that brings us to the third piece of good news for this Advent season. Advent calls us to bear witness in our daily lives to the Christ who is yet to come. That's what Christ meant for his disciples to do as they waited for the culmination of history. They were to bear faithful witness to the love and the power that they had received and discovered in Jesus Christ. Sue Kidd tells about when her daughter was small and got the dubious part of the Bethlehem star in a Christmas play. After her first rehearsal, she burst through the door with her costume, a 5-pointed star lined with shiny gold tinsel designed to drape over like a sandwich board. What exactly will you be doing in the play? Her mother asked. This was her daughter's answer. I just stand there and shine. Her mother says she never forgot that response. See, Jesus' disciples were concerned about the future and their part in it. Jesus wanted them to know that their role was to stay behind and shine. But they wouldn't be alone. He would always be with them. He would give them the power to transform their heartaches into hallelujahs every day. There's a great story about St. Francis of Assisi that illustrates this pretty well. It was a winter night. There was a raging blizzard outside, and the man who was supposed to wake up every couple of hours to keep the fire going at the monastery was unable to find Francis. So he went outside into the storm, and he found St. Francis kneeling by the side of a hill, wearing his ordinary clothing. His arms were outstretched. He was praying, oblivious to the wind and the biting cold snow. A day later, when the man asked Francis how he could stand this, Francis replied, God warms my heart when I keep my eyes fixed on him. God warms our hearts too when we keep our eyes fixed on him. It's so easy to lose ourselves in self-pity and to be called bitter rather than to be called bubbles. There are situations in life that, if not dealt with properly, can leave us depressed and weary. These are times when it appears as if they will never change. However, from God's perspective, all things are working together for our good and the glory of God. Even though you may struggle, you can be victorious always by placing your trust in Jesus Christ. And even though your life may be touched by strife and sorrow and difficulty, you can have peace because Christ is your living hope. He is infinitely stronger than anything you and I will ever face. With God's strength flowing through you, you can live to fight another day. There's a theme song from a classic Broadway play that says it all. It says, "You gotta have heart." You gotta have heart. This is the power you need to get your gears churning and working. You need the courage and the comfort that flows from the heart of God. This is the promise of Advent. In what appears to be so much darkness in our world today and even in our own community, we are called to trust in God, who will call us out of fear into the power of faith. The Bible promises us that in the midst of darkness, we will be able to see the Son of Man coming in clouds with great power and great glory. Stand up and raise your heads because your redemption is drawing near. That's the word of hope and victory of Advent. That's what Advent is all about. That's what it's about. It's the promise that enables us to move from fear to faith. Our task is to wait for that promise of redemption, because that redemption can transform our heartaches into hallelujahs. I feel sad for those who are content to sit on the sidelines complaining, while others are in the arena, spending themselves in the cause of Christ. You see, there is big work to be done. That's why we're here. And due to that promise made a long, long time ago, we can stand up, raise our heads, because our redemption is drawing near. Thanks for watching. I hope this video can further the discussion of your relationship with Christ, either at home or maybe in the comments below.